New Zealand Tech Podcast, the voice of the tech community, proudly supported by Umbrella Connect.
Greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. Today here with Jason Langley, Managing Director at Ingram Micro. Welcome, Jason.
Thanks, Paul. Good to be here.
Thanks for joining the show. Keen to hear a little bit, I guess, to start with a little bit of background is who is Ingram Micro? Those that are working within the technology sphere in New Zealand, a lot will have had interactions with Ingram Micro, but I'm sure there are plenty that don't know too much about Ingram. Probably a name that's been heard, but is it a small local company, or is it a $40-50 billion global enterprise? Give us some background.
It's a good question, and when people tend to explain where they work, the answer is, you mean the chicken company, Ingham's. And one of the things that we've said over the years is we're the biggest company you've never heard of, and that's really just the way we like it from an end user or a customer point of view. We tend to be well known by the reseller community, the partner community, but not the people that are buying from those partners. So we're an international, we're a multi-country, multinational, with revenues in excess of $40 billion US in a given year. And a long history. We go back to 1979, I think, was the year that we were actually originally founded. Started off life in New Zealand before Tech Pacific as Imagineering, and morphed into Tech Pacific, and it's had a number of different owners over the years, and then Ingram Micro got involved and took over Tech Pacific in the early 2000s. So been around a long time, established a great customer base and a great business, and have grown like a weed over the years. So it's been a fantastic journey. Yeah.
So when did you join Ingram, and what were you doing prior to being part of Ingram Micro?
My story's a long story, and I'll try and keep it short. I started off life studying law, and decided that law was not for me. It bored me to tears, so I got into my next passion, I guess, which was computers. The ironic thing these days is, as MD of Ingram Micro, I spend a lot of my time reading contracts and negotiating contracts, so I didn't really stray too far from law. But I've been in the IT industry since I was about 20 years old, in sales, marketing, technical development roles as well, where I've done graphic design, website design, database design, coding. And then most recently, I've been with Ingram since 2013, so 8 years nearly, and started off that role running the IBM, HPE and Cisco business unit, and over time that's just morphed and grown into different things as I've taken on more responsibility, and then ultimately now to the managing director role.
Yeah, oh, that's great. So stepping into that role, it was about a year ago. And of course, the countries and the planets had a fair bit of disruption. So, what were those first few months like, being in the leadership role, having to look after a team of, how many have you got here in New Zealand?
About 400.
Yeah.
So it started off with a hiss and a roar, actually. Because we wanted to keep it under wraps that Gary Bigwood, the previous managing director, was leaving, and that I was stepping in. I couldn't announce it to anyone until I was actually in the role. So that background preparation was a little bit more difficult. Roll into January last year, and the very first thing that I had to do was really start to work with the leadership team. So who were my peers, and now I'm their boss, and then start preparing for a country business review with my new boss, who I knew quite well, his new boss, who I didn't know quite so well, but those business review events tend to be quite intense and a lot of preparation. So January disappeared with a hiss and a roll, and then we rolled into February, and that was when we first really started pricking our ears up around, what's this COVID-19 thing? Or it was coronavirus then. It wasn't even COVID-19. We referred to it as coronavirus. And really started looking at what's going on, and is this going to be a big thing, or is it going to be a SARS or a bird flu or swine flu or something like that, which was really that fizzled out pretty quickly. But it quickly became apparent that it was going to be a bigger deal, and I remember some of the first decisions that I had to make were quite big decisions. Cancelling Showcase, for example, it's an Ingram Micro and an industry institution. It's been around for 24 years. It was due to be the 25th anniversary. So very early in February, had to cancel that, and then explain that to the partners that already invested and put time and money and effort into it. And then I remember the next big thing, which was we had a promotional or an incentive reward event going on in Rio, in Brazil, and that was a six-figure sum that we'd invested into that we just had to cancel. And the thing at the time was Rio didn't have a single case of COVID at the time, so it was one of those decisions: do we err on the side of caution? Do we just plough ahead? But we erred on the side of caution, and in hindsight, it was absolutely the right decision. Would absolutely do it again if we had to do it today. So that really kind of took care of February, and then roll into March. And I remember it was March the 3rd that we kicked our BCP, our business continuity plan, into place, and said, right, this is going to be bigger than we hoped, or bigger than we expected. So let's start making sure that we've got everything covered. And then through the middle of March, we really moved into I guess hyper mode, and we had daily leadership team calls. So I had the entire leadership team, and what started out as a 15-minute call really quickly got into a 45-minute, hour-long call as we were making some of those key decisions as to how we were going to continue operating over the next few months as this thing continued to unfold. So that was middle of March, and then on the 21st of March, of course, we had the government announcement that we were at alert level 2, like that, and really had to start thinking about, right, how do we deal with this? Because none of us had been through a pandemic before. None of us had navigated anything even remotely similar. But I think the one thing that kind of sprang to mind was, we've got to communicate openly and transparently and frequently with the team, and lead through this with the team front of mind and empathy, and absolutely be thinking about how they're feeling, because there's absolutely going to be a degree of anxiety, particularly around uncertainty of what the future holds, and job security, and I've got a mortgage to pay or rent to make. Am I going to have a job going through this? So we made sure that we were communicating regularly, often, several times a week in many cases, and really kind of putting ourselves in the shoes of all the team at Ingram and making sure that what would we want if we were in that position.
Yeah, really, really critical, isn't it, to get that balance right, because you want to make sure that business needs to survive, but ultimately you've got no business without your people.
No.
And you need to you really need to be thinking about them. So that's a good approach. So when it came to the switch being flicked, as it were, to step into lockdown, what did those few days look like, and how relaxed was that for you?
People have asked me, or said to me, what a crazy year to come in and take over the leadership role in Ingram. And I've said, by and large, it's been reasonably straightforward and reasonably plain sailing. But that week, from the 21st of March, which was a Saturday, through to eventual lockdown on the 25th of March at 11:59, was just a race. So it was long hours, it was early hours. We had said to the team, right, on Saturday, we're working from home from Monday morning, so come in and get your stuff. Get your mice, get your keyboards, get your monitors, take your chair home if you need it. Whatever's going to make you feel comfortable working from home. So that was Monday, and from there the office was locked. We didn't go back until after lockdown had ended. But then, of course, we had the race to establish ourselves as an essential service and make sure that we could still transact after lockdown.
Yeah. So how did that look? Because I think really lots of people were really reliant, actually, during that lockdown window, of being able to get hold of appropriate technology. Some organisations were further ahead in terms of, all our staff run from laptops, and everyone's got a home office set up to oh well, everyone works on a PC or what have you, and no, there's no working from home. And suddenly that was the case, and of course I guess there are all sorts of other scenarios that needed to be addressed during that time window. So was it easy to work out who to talk to at government level and hoops to jump through, because they must have been basically doing this, a lot of it on the fly as well, right?
Yeah, we did have to navigate pretty dynamically and pretty fluidly, and the work from home thing for us was actually pretty good. Most of our team were on laptops. We had a solid VPN in place so that we knew that we could have the number of concurrent users that we needed to keep the business going. I think the challenging part came when the New Zealand government was still building its approach and didn't really have all the answers. So if you went to the COVID-19 website, the guidelines, the instructions were changing on a daily basis. And where we were contracted to some of our partners, and they were already identified with letterhead from MB as being an essential service, ultimately we could have tagged on underneath that as well.
Yes.
But there's no way that I wanted to fall afoul of the New Zealand government. So I said, look, we need our own guidance, our own instruction from MB to be able to continue on. And I remember that the COVID website didn't have any links, any applications for approval or anything along those lines until, I can't remember which day it was. I think it was Thursday morning, the 26th. And I happened to wake up early, and first thing I did was, it was 4 o'clock in the morning, I remember the time, and refresh the website. Oh, there's a link I can apply. So spent the next half an hour hammering out a justification as to why we should be considered for essential service, not knowing that one of my team had already done the same, or had also done the same thing. Yeah. And then I was watching the 1 o'clock briefing with, and I can't remember his name. He was like deputy CEO of MB, and I got his name, and I figured it's going to be first name dot last name at mb.gov. So I sent him the same email, and then started having conversations with those contract partners and saying, look, we need this. Can you help us get to the top of the queue at MB so that we can keep the doors open? And one way or another, it all happened, and we got our own letter from MB later that day, and could continue transacting as an essential service. And then from there, and I'll keep this next part brief, but from there we needed to make sure that those that we were transacting with were also transacting as an essential service, because some people were getting their knuckles wrapped for saying they could, but they actually weren't. So with that, we sent an email out to all of our customer base saying, we'll transact with you if you're transacting as an essential service. Reply to this email so that we can keep track of that. And of around 3,000 active transacting partners in a given year, we had about 500 respond, which told me that a large proportion of the IT community in New Zealand decided we're just going to hunker down and ride this out and see what happens, and not worry about transacting. So it was a very interesting time, just watching the ebbs and the flows of the different portions of the business, from infrastructure and volume devices and what have you.
Yeah, wow. And when we look out sort of through the rest of the year, obviously there were just a lot of business as usual type things going on by the sounds of it, and the business was sort of meanwhile was growing as well. You've just opened a new distribution centre, or that's opening shortly.
Opening shortly, yeah. It's just about complete. In fact, it had a soft completion in mid-December with a target end date of just doing all the last minute tidy up, etc. by the end of March. So we can touch on that shortly if you like. Rolling into or out of lockdown, what we found was there was a lot of infrastructure projects still going on. We actually thought those would stop, they'd dry up, because we figured, who's going to want to put infrastructure in right now? But as they were already in progress, a lot of them closed out. So that was going solid, going well. But that was the retail business that had stopped, and the SMB business that had stopped as well. And then you roll forward a couple of months, and SMB and retail started to pick up again as lockdowns died away. We came out of 4 to 3 to 2 to 1, and the infrastructure side of the business slowed down. and the reason for that is pretty obvious. It's there weren't those face-to-face conversations going on. People couldn't build pipeline. They couldn't create connections. So that was really through the middle of the year. But for us, work from home went absolutely gangbusters. So laptops, keyboards, mice, monitors, all those things that enterprises needed to equip their teams while working from home. Headsets. So if we had a headset in stock, it was gone.
Yeah, I can imagine that would have been a bit of a challenge for some people that needed headsets or webcams and other things, and
Absolutely.
there was no way to actually get your hands on many of them.
It really kind of showed the remaining value that still exists in traditional logistics and distribution. We've moved more to an as-a-service model, a subscription-based model, even a direct shipping model to end users through their reseller partners. But if we had it in stock, it sold. And it got to the point where in our 10,000 square metre warehouse, 10,000 square metres, to put it in perspective, is really the size of it's bigger than a rugby field. We had 12 laptops left. Just 12. Everything else had sold.
Wow.
So it was quite incredible just watching.
And what sort of stock would you usually carry of laptops?
In terms of unit count, I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I've never
probably
actually looked.
probably many thousands, but
It would
whether
be
it's 1,000 or 10,000,
Yeah, it'd be a few thousand.
Yeah,
In a given, an average is around 50 million in inventory across the board. But that goes up and down depending on what's going on, what season it is. And I remember we actually got to the lowest point in our inventory holding that I've seen in the last 5 years during COVID, because everything just went out the door.
Now, you mentioned what was I trying to get to there? Some of the challenges, stock and other things. Your interaction sort of internationally with the rest of the organisation. What are Ingram's objectives as a business? With a lot of things changing. You mentioned value in this sort of distribution model is still there.
Yeah.
Where does a business like this go amid a world that is changing pretty quickly? Different distribution models, the Amazons and big global players, even the on other online marketplaces as well. Trade Me locally, the Chinese ones and so on. Where do you fit, and what's the strategy?
It's a very broad question, and there's lots of different angles to answer that from. But I think, and I'll start with an anecdote of a conversation that I had recently. We were talking at a regional level with one of our vendors, actually, just around what is selling and what does marketing in the new normal look like. And everyone was talking about virtual events and Zoom and Teams calls and what have you, and figuring out new ways to market using in their reality. And I said, hang on guys, just take a step back for a sec, because as soon as this thing's died down in your country, things are going to get back to a really high degree of normality, as we've seen in New Zealand. We're back to face-to-face meetings. We're back to events. We're no longer selling digitally and selling over Teams and Zoom calls. So I think that's an important understanding point, is that as soon as this thing goes away, we are largely back to normal. Sure, the world's going to change, and certainly the way we work, where we work, how we work, and the time, the 9 to 5, I think, has probably changed forever. And in terms of Ingram Micro, our strategy all revolves around customer centricity. It's keeping that customer front of mind, at the forefront of our mind, in every conversation, in every transaction. We've got really 3 overarching strategies or strategic objectives, and that's one is winning together, which means partnering more with our customers, not just being a transaction facility, but how do we help you grow your business? How do we work together to make sure that you're optimizing your route to market and your engagement with your customers Mr. or Miss Partner.
Probably pretty important, because there are some aspects of technology that look as though they're getting simpler, but other aspects are getting more and more complicated. There's the threads of technology just run through everything, don't they? And especially, well, probably organisations of any size having the right expertise in the right place is pretty hard. So being able to tap in and get the appropriate assistance, I would think pretty important.
Yeah, and that actually forms the third strategic pillar from a global perspective, which we've brought down locally and have applied to our own 3-year plan as well. But that third pillar is really around delivering more solutions. So it's not just about selling a widget. Here's a widget, customer, we put a margin on it, you put your margin on it and sell it out. It's about bringing together holistic solutions, and we've gone a step further and made it effectively a 360-degree life cycle type solution that we make available. And I said at our Ingram One event last year that it's not about selling more stuff, it's about providing more tools and more services for the partner community to draw upon to help them be successful. It's things like how do we help out with marketing? So we've got our own internal marketing agency we've called Agency Ingram Micro, and we partner with our vendors can tap into that to do marketing overflow, or things that they can't do locally, they'll use us, lean on us to do. And same with our reseller partners. We've got a number of campaigns in the market that you wouldn't know that it's Ingram Micro behind it, but we've helped that reseller take an end user marketing campaign to market. So that's the start, and then you've got Ingram Micro Financial Services. So wrapping leasing and lease to own and device as a service sort of models around that whole sales transaction, and then you've got. I knew it's like naming the 7 dwarves. You always miss one. I'll go to the end, which was IT asset disposition. So it's bringing it all back in once you've hit end of life cycle.
Yeah.
So it creates that holistic approach, and our partners are starting to kind of gravitate towards that and see, I can get everything from one place and really take advantage of it.
Yeah, that's great. I was just talking to a company yesterday, and they're sort of sourcing different bits and pieces from a whole range of places, and I mean, this was in terms of technology and telecommunication services and so on, and we're hearing about the finger pointing and just the inefficiencies of talk to this party, talk to that party.
Yeah.
And look, if you can do a great job of offering a really broad set of services and products, it's pretty handy.
Yeah, and I did a bit of analysis on it last year and looked at a high level of the top vendors that are represented in New Zealand. There's roughly 600. There's probably a few more and a few littler ones as well that are not necessarily on our radar, but around 600. And of those, we've got 240. So rough numbers, that's about 40% of the available vendor count in the country, which means that it really does become that one-stop shop capability for our partners.
Yeah, no, and I think that's probably certainly historically why why a lot of people have done business with with Ingram is you can go there and get most of the well-known brands.
Yep,
the market sort of mixed itself up a bit over over the last probably 10 years. There's a bit more sort of fragmentation than there once was, but
Yeah. I mean, vendors move around from time to time, and there's always new conversations going on. And look, we're not perfect. I know that our website, our current website, leaves a bit to be desired. The good news is that we're in the process of rolling out a very new version of that, a very modern website, which will be it'll keep pace with the sort of things that you're used to. Which might offer up suggestions for the people that bought this, bought that sort of thing. So that's going through a stage rollout at the moment. So some of our customers will already have seen it, and then others will start seeing it over the next few weeks. So that's exciting because
for those sorts of things, where does being part of a global entity help you? And where does it make it harder? Because sometimes I sort of see of an organisation that's of a large scale, and they take so long to do things, and then their competitors are kind of racing ahead and much more agile. Then on the flip side, it might be that a larger organisation really is able to take cybersecurity much more seriously. They're able to deliver capabilities and offerings that smaller local companies just can't compete with, because they've got a global budget. And I guess you could compare it to Uber, their investment in their app and their services. They can just pour so much into making sure that stuff works really well, and then a local taxi company that's trying to compete. They might end up with something that sort of looks similar to the offering, but how secure and so on it is, privacy aspects and how robust and stable it is can vary. How does that play out for Ingram here in New Zealand?
I think it can be a wee bit of a double-edged sword. I mean, you use the word agility, and where we are constrained by what's going on internationally, what decisions are being made internationally. The flip side of that is that the investments that are made internationally are a lot bigger than what we could manage ourselves just here in New Zealand, and they're bigger than what our competitors can manage, but certainly our smaller ones here in New Zealand. The good news from my perspective, and having been there for nearly 8 years, I've seen the accelerated pace of change. 3 or 4 years ago, it was quite slow, and the IT systems weren't that great. But with new leadership that's come in at a global level, both from an IT point of view, from a cloud marketplace point of view, we're starting to see a really accelerated pace of change, even from a logistics point of view. So I think it's quite an exciting time for Ingram, because we're seeing things move ahead, not quite with the agility of a small local player, but almost. And it's going to be big for us in the New Zealand market and for our customers.
Yeah, I mean, we had an example recently. I think someone on our team at my technology services firm Gorilla reached out to Ingram and a number of other people that we would source product through. And my recollection was with Ingram, we can give you electronic price feeds via API. You can talk backwards and forwards, do anything you want. And then there were other ones that were sort of smaller, local players that were, that's too hard, or we can only we can give you some sort of a rudimentary sort of dump of data, but it's it's actually not so helpful. And so I imagine those sorts of things you really you're tapping in and leveraging what's being done on a global basis.
That one not so much. That one we're actually doing locally. So we've got a local business ops team that we've tasked with years and years and years ago with moving everything from really physical interaction to automated electronic interaction. And that can be, to your point, it can be automated price feeds with absolutely integrated EDI between systems, or it can be as simple as scraping an email that comes through using automated tools to then take out the key parts. Because typically, if you send an email with an order on it, it's going to take the same format every time, because it's going to come out of your own ERP system, your own accounting system. And if we know that Gorilla Technology has this particular format, then we can take that in that format. So having that local capability, local team to augment what's going on internationally is also quite gratifying, because we often turn around best practice locally here for the region and the globe to adopt. Which is good, and it's kudos to the team as well. Now,
what are the other areas that are exciting you at the moment and of a lot of interest? Because you sit in this sort of unique position of seeing what's selling into the market, what's not, seeing where there's a lot of uptake, and I guess we all sort of see different things from our own perspective, but you've probably got a slightly broader perspective than some of us.
Yeah, I guess I've got a Jason's view of what's going to happen and how things are working. And I think if I go back to March, April last year, and a lot of decisions I think were made at that time that snap decisions. We've got to respond now. We've got to get this equipment into our end users so they can remain effective.
Yeah.
And I think what's likely to happen this year, particularly as we start heading into the year, I think you'll see that those businesses that did that and didn't make any kind of remediation through the year or any adjustments through the year, they were hunkering down, they were riding out the year to see what happens. I think you'll start to see those stick their heads back up and say, right, that decision that we made over there, it got us 90% of the way there, but we need to remediate, we need to add this, we need to do this to really get it to be A, effective, B, secure, and make sure that we've got that security between home and the office.
Yeah,
And
some things, by necessity moved very quickly, didn't they? And they weren't decisions that, if you had a bit more time, you would have necessarily taken.
Absolutely. And then I think, we're going to start to see, I think this year will still be a year of growth. I think we will continue to see work from home products selling well. And there will be some additional products that weren't necessarily considered in work from home to begin with that will move quickly. Just lost my train of thought. So I think work from home, yes. I think PCs, laptops particularly, will still continue to grow. So IDC is predicting that we'll see 3% growth in laptops this year. Now that's a global metric, but I still think there's room for that to continue locally here in New Zealand as well.
Yeah, I mean, it would seem most businesses, I would imagine, after having been through lockdown, are unlikely to be ordering sort of PCs to sit on desks to any great degree anymore if they weren't already predominantly on laptops. It's we've just been given a pretty clear nudge forward that makes a lot of sense from a business continuity perspective, as well as the flexibility of how people like to work from home and different locations and so on. What does your work look like? What does your day-to-day work like? Are you sort of just stuck in an office and tapping away and reading and sending out reports, or are you out and about a lot?
Depends on the day. Last year I wasn't out and about a lot. This year I intend to be out and about with vendors and customers, partners on a much more regular basis. But I guess I'm a terrible sleeper, and I kind of alluded to that before when we were going through essential service, and I was up at 4 o'clock. And many mornings I'm up at 4 o'clock and just because I'm awake, and I'll be dealing with whatever emails have come in that night, whatever reading I need to do to prep for the day. I still work from the office 5 days a week, and that's really personal preference. I like to be in and around the team. I like to have that separation between home and work. But in saying that, my home office is set up better than my work office, so maybe I'm the idiot for going to the office.
And how many or how does it work with your team? Do they all need to be operating from the office, or is that you've got half the people you had in the office as you had a year ago, or how does that look?
So with COVID and then return to offices, and we returned really cautiously. We had a staggered return, and we had corporate global guidelines in terms of, right, this is what you must do. You must wear a mask while you're in the office. Kitchens and communal areas must be closed. And gradually, as lockdowns diminished, we reduced those restrictions. But what it did cause us to do was evaluate how we work and where we work and what that might look like. So as we were heading into lockdown last year, we were about to do a refit of our headquarters, which was about 11 years old, so getting a bit tired, needing a bit of a lick of paint. And we put a hold on that because of the uncertainty, the unpredictability as to what was going to happen. And what it gave us the opportunity to do was really rethink, how do we want to work as we come out of this? And the result being is that after the second lockdown in August, some of the leadership team and I did a wee tour of some of the hot desking environments, Auckland Council, Kantar, Comar Brunton, and had a look at how they worked. And I remember talking to the general manager at Kantar at the time. I said, what occupancy have you gone for? And he said, well, we went for 80%. So having 80% of our workforce in at any given time. And he said, I wish we'd gone for 60%.
Wow.
So I turned to the team and I said, we're going for 50. And we've geared up to go to 50% occupancy. So as we go through our refit, which is just starting to kick back into process now, it'll be full hot desking, no offices. So I've got an office at the moment, as do a couple of the other leadership team members, but those are all going. We'll go to full open plan. And
have you tried it for yourself?
I'm fine. I've got nothing on my desk. My desk is as clean as this, so I don't mind.
Yeah. I've struggled with it. So I've moved from an office that's turned into a podcast studio, and I'm used. I guess I've had 20 years of used to having my own little very quiet box.
Right.
And so it's a bit of a transition.
I've been in those environments before, and in fact, prior to this, in my last role, it was a very open plan. So I'm looking forward to it, and I think the team's looking forward to it. But we've also changed the requirement to be in the office. So we've said we want you in the office minimum 2 days a week. So be in the office. Other than that, work from home. So you've got that option as an Ingram Micro employee to work from home 3 days a week. Reality is that many of our employees, we call them associates, are transient anyway. They're account managers, they're business development managers, they're solutions architects, and they're spending their time out with customers anyway.
Yeah.
So there'll be weeks that go by where I don't see a particular person. So it's only a subtle change for probably half of our workforce.
Yeah. Now, you got your new distribution centre on the way. I'm curious. I'm sure some of our listeners will be around. What technology are you putting in place there? Is this all robotics, and you don't need anybody working in there? How do you make that work? Now, there was saw some footage the other day from Foodstuffs North Island, and I don't know if you've seen any on their new distribution centre, which I imagine is rather large because they've got a lot of supermarkets to keep full around the country. I can't remember what size it was, but there was what looked like it was some sort of either fingerprint or sort of facial recognition scan as people came in for timesheets, and there seemed to be a fair bit of technology that was sort of going into that place. Looked quite cutting edge.
Right.
Where does Ingram land on that sort of front? With does much change or
not a lot changes, to be honest.
Yeah.
We don't have robotics in there, and we've looked at that in the past and looked at the cost of putting that in and the return and the payback, and that ROI is just way too far out to actually make that a viable option. But what we have done is and it's not a new distribution centre; it's an extension of the existing one.
right?
And what we've done is we've replaced all the racking. So the racking was getting a bit old, and what that's allowed us to do is to take the racking up another layer, so we can put more inventory in. We've moved some of the functions that we had at the front of the warehouse into the new extension, and even outside the warehouse. Which has given us the ability to bring the racks forward, which gives us a lot more inventory space. So where we've increased the footprint about 35%, we've actually got about 85% more usable space. Part of that comes from covering in the canopy outside, the breezeway outside with the canopy. So historically, when we've been bringing goods into the warehouse, we've had to do it pretty quickly in wet weather, and then we do all the unboxing and what have you inside the warehouse. Now we can do that all outside the warehouse. So what it does is it opens us up to being able to bring more inventory in, and different types of inventory. Opens us up to be able to provide more in the way of services. So we've got a growing third-party logistics business as well, which will start building more with new vendors and bringing new vendors on board to really take advantage of that new space that we've got.
Oh, it's good. Change afoot.
Yes.
And growth. Anything else that you'd like to add? I know there's lots more things we probably could delve into, but I'm mindful you probably don't have all afternoon to hang out, chat. You've got a business to run.
Yeah. Look, I think I would leave the conversation on the fact that I think we're going to see continued growth this year. I think New Zealand has shown its resilience in relation to COVID-19. I think there's lots of opportunities that abound. I think if I was talking to resellers right now, which I guess I am, is look at things like security, look at hybrid IT, look at edge computing, look at Internet of Things. we're investing in all of those areas. Internet of Things is, we think, as a global entity, is going to be a pretty significant event for us all. And if you go back 10 years, we really invested in cloud marketplace and as a service and subscription-based billing to remain relevant and to really drive our business for the future. As we headed into tail end of 2019, we were building a customer experience center in just outside our head office in Irvine, in California, so that people could go along and play and learn about Internet of Things. And while that hasn't been able to be used yet because of what's going on over in the States, it shows the level of investment that we're making in that area. So that flows down to New Zealand as well, and we're bringing on new vendors in that category and really pulling together a holistic service that encompasses the devices, the network layer, the billing layer, and all that sort of thing as well. So I think there's lots of exciting areas to be playing in, and we're fortunate that we've got those relationships across the board that we can take advantage of it and help our reseller partners take advantage of it for their to help solve business problems for their customers.
Yeah, well, I think that's what it comes down to, doesn't it? It's about solving business problems. It's about making New Zealand more successful by leveraging technology in the latest and greatest, and the things that are going to make organisations more successful. And it's got ongoing challenges from those that are selling technology to try and find out where does that really help their customers, and for those New Zealand organisations that are buying technology to know where to invest. And I guess my thoughts on that is that it's really important for for Kiwis, wherever you sort of sit in the technology sector, to be exploring and learning about all of the technologies. You're utilising the things that are going to bring an uplift to your organisation, and then on the other side, looking at those cyber security and risk factors and working out how to squash those things. And I'm sure Ingram will continue to play a role in in serving the country with helping in these areas.
I certainly hope so.
Yeah,
that's the plan.
Well, great to have you on the show, Jason. Really appreciate it.
Good to be here. Thanks, Paul.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening in to this episode of the New Zealand Tech Podcast. We'll be back again with another episode for you next week. All right. See ya.
New Zealand Tech Podcast, the voice of the tech community. Proudly supported by Umbrella Connect.